afternoon.
It is my pleasure to meet you, the Honorable Andrew Gillum.
Gillum.
I gotcha. Sounds great. It is my privilege to be able to sit here with you. I've heard so many things about you, even before you launched your gubernatorial race. But it is a pleasure to be able to sit down with you because so many people, you have truly gained a lot of traction.
We're working hard.
Because I saw that you were in South Florida not too long ago, and I saw it on all the local news stations in Palm Beach County.
Wow.
So I know that you're gaining so much traction.
Yeah, we're working hard.
Well, let's get started, Honorable Mr. Gillum. Andrew.
Okay.
I'll say Andrew.
All right.
I'll oblige you and say Andrew.
Thank
I
you.
feel a little awkward saying Andrew,
Andrew,
but I'll
please.
say Andrew.
All right.
Okay, you're used to first. You were the youngest elected commissioner in the city of Tallahassee at the tender age of 23. Only 23 years old. How did you know about all of that?
Oh my gosh.
Amazing. Now, should you win this race, you will become the first African American governor in this great state of Florida. What made you throw your hat into the ring?
Well, I tell you, I have been in Tallahassee, obviously, as a student going there to Florida A&M University. My first year as a student at FAMU, I spent it marching up to the Capitol protesting Jeb Bush because his first year he introduced the, through executive order, the repeal of affirmative action and higher education and in-state contracting, which led to the largest civil rights march in Florida history, led by Kendrick Meek, then state senator, and Tony Hill, then state representative, and we marched thousands of students from FAMU up to the Capitol demanding, although we were in college, for many of us, we understood that our responsibility was greater than just to ourselves, that we were there for our community, for our siblings, for our friends who had not yet made it to college and didn't know whether or not they would need to exercise what affirmative action offered. And so when you have watched this state for 20 years, under consecutive Republican leadership, we've had to survive through the wake of what that has meant through public policy, the privatization of the public education system, a governor who doesn't believe in science, the refusal to expand access to Medicaid for 1.5 million of the most medically needy people, poor folks, lots of them people of color, a governor who just seems uninterested in what is the plight and the lived experience of so many Floridians. And so we've got an opportunity in 2018, this year, this November, to turn the tide and for the first time in 20 years, elect a Democrat. And if I become the nominee on August the 28th of 2018, I'll be the first African American to lead a major party in this state. And obviously if we go forward to win the governorship, we'll make history there. But more importantly, winning would mean the kind of public policy solutions that I think are going to benefit and provide uplift again for our communities.
Awesome. That sounds great. Now, you mentioned this in your speech at the F. Malcolm Cunningham Bar Association's luncheon. Obviously, the nation is in mourning over the shooting, the school massacre in Parkland, Florida.
Yes.
They're tossing around so many different ideas. Arming teachers, mental illness, metal detectors, armed guards. What is the answer in your estimation?
Less guns. Fewer guns is in part the answer. Now, I realize guns and school violence is a more complicated and nuanced issue. But even when you're dealing with someone with mental health issues, and I do believe that we ought to provide mental health counseling, not just for those who are deeply aggrieved, such to the point that they think it's okay to take a life, but there are people every day who are surviving through all kinds of trauma. And our need to make sure that we provide mental health counseling is an important thing for greater society, not just for what happens with gun violence. We also should be funding mental health courts for those who are being adjudicated through the normal court system, who really what they need is expanded Medicare so that they can go and get access to a doctor and the kind of medical attention that they need. Yet it only seems to gain traction when there's a school shooting, a mass shooting. Republicans are quick to throw out there, well, only if this person had mental health counseling. Well, even if they were mentally troubled, if it were not for an AR-15, they could not go in, take out the lives of 17 precious individuals, a gun, a rifle that fires off 45 rounds of artillery in less than 60 seconds. Those are weapons of war. If you want to shoot an AR-15, if you want to shoot an assault rifle, if you want to shoot a gun with a high-capacity magazine, go join the military. But not on our city streets, not in our schools, not the places where we as parents are supposed to feel the comfort and security or safeness. And so I'm in favor of, yes, all of the mental health pieces, and that's not a throwaway. But we also need real background checks. We also need to close the gun show loophole. We also need to close the private loophole, which means the exchange that happened between you and me. 42% of guns in this country are exchanged just that way. But we don't have a mandatory registration. We don't know what those guns are. We can hardly account for them. We don't know whose hands they may fall into. And so there are some common sense steps that can be taken, but unfortunately, so long as the 5 million member NRA hold hostage the other 300 plus million of us, we're never going to see that kind of change. We need political courage and political leadership, and that's completely absent, not only at the state level, but also at the federal level.
Yes, sir. Now, a few nights ago, CNN hosted a town hall meeting. I believe that was on Wednesday night, I can't remember. Yeah. But they hosted a town hall meeting, and our governor, Rick Scott, was a no-show.
No-show.
Now, even Marco Rubio came.
And he's gotten $3 million from him, and he showed up.
Yes, but he showed up.
That's right.
And the governor of this great state of Florida did not see fit to show up. What are your thoughts about
Well,
that?
I think it's cowardice. It's political cowardice. When you're the governor of the state of Florida, whether you agree with, comprehensive gun reform or not, your state is hurting. You saw the senseless loss of life of 17 individuals. He came down here for the press immediately following, where there was no real opportunity to engage and exchange and ask questions and ask what his plan was. He did that. But the one opportunity that he had to talk not only to this state but to this country, and more importantly to the grieving families, to the families of Parkland who are going to be expected to return to school next week without any real sense of normalcy, any real confidence that anything is going to change. That the governor had an opportunity to come down here to face those individuals, to face their tough questions. And even if, as you saw with Senator Rubio, where there is a disagreement, that he gets to understand the fervor under which these people are motivated, they're afraid. We deserve to hear from our governor, and it's a shame that we didn't.
Yes, absolutely. As governor, what is the first thing you would want to change about the state of Florida?
Well, without a doubt, it'd be our education system. I think I know what public education did by way of providing me opportunity. It breaks my heart to see the agenda, not even a veiled agenda, to move our public system toward private, for-profit education. That's not to say anything of charter schools. When I say for-profit education, you have profit-making entities who are coming into this state, creating a new enterprise around how it is that you pay and gain benefits through the education of our children. And the education system, back at its core, is the one place under which, regardless of where you come from, it's a public trust that exists between the public and its government that every kid will have an opportunity to learn. Not those who live on one side of the track, and not those who live on another. Not those who come from good families versus those who don't, but every child is guaranteed the opportunity to learn in a high education academic environment. And our addiction to high stakes tests, which don't tell us what our kids know, but how well they take a test, is ruining the educational experience for our kids. Our addiction to only college bound leaves the literal other half of our kids that are not on a pathway to college with no skills, very few job opportunities, and for those job opportunities that do exist, they got to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet because it's low wage work. Now, that shouldn't be the case in the third largest state in all of America. We're a state of 20 million people, one of the most richly diverse states in all of America. We should be the place where companies and corporations are flocking over themselves to get into the state of Florida, to get a little bit of what we've got. And unfortunately, when we talk about recruiting good jobs into the state, good paying jobs, those companies are telling us that they can't find the talent that they need in the state of Florida, largely because we're producing kids in a public education system that is 37th in quality by compared to the other 50 states. Where we got the lowest starting salary for teachers, we're in the bottom 10 when it comes to starting salaries for teachers. We can fix those things. Florida ought to lead in this area and not follow. And if we're leading, we ought to be leading with the right indicators and not the wrong indicators. We know enough about what we've got to do. It requires the political leadership to get it done. So for me, without a doubt, early childhood education, 0 to 5, making access to that, raising teacher salaries. I propose $50,000 starting salaries for teachers. And obviously, diminishing the role of high-stakes testing in our state to make sure that we unleash the talent and the potential of our teachers to do what they were hired to do, which is to teach, and then make sure that we offer the opportunity for our kids to learn.
Absolutely. Our President of the United States has said and done some things, to say the least, that are controversial. Some people even call him a racist. He has certainly given us enough fodder to go around.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about our President of these United States of America?
Well, the President is wholly unqualified for the job that he holds. That being said, that case got litigated in the 2016 election, and he's the president until 2020. What I hope that we do as a result of his election is that people will become hyper-activated around the democratic process of what it means to vote, to get engaged, to hold accountable. Because truth be told, even during the 8 years of the Obama administration, many of us thought, oh, we've got a black president, we've rallied, we've gotten him elected, and then we left him to fend for himself. We didn't provide him the bandwidth that he needed, the backup he needed to move the kind of courageous and unapologetic agenda that we all know we needed. And I don't blame the president for that. I blame a lot of us for the fact that when you get in politics and in political office, I liken it to the Malcolm Martin analogy, right? The reason why we could get the kind of gains that we had with Martin, and it's not to romanticize it, it wasn't easy. But the government knew that there was another faction out there, that if you didn't deal fairly here, that there may be other consequences. And I'm not by any means encouraging violence. That's not what I mean. But what I mean is that people have to know that if they don't deal fairly with us, that the population will hold you accountable, that they're going to demand movement and action, and that you can't stonewall an agenda because you know no one's going to be there to speak up to say, no, we're not going to stand for that. We've got to be prepared to have, yes, people inside government moving the ball forward, but we also need people outside the walls of government that are moving and insisting on change more rapidly and unapologetic in their demands. Let us, on the political side, work out the calculus of how we get there. But we need the leverage. And the leverage comes from people on the outside saying, we're not satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my final question, and then I have a comment from one of your constituents in Tallahassee. But finally, why should Floridians cast their vote for you in August or November?
Yeah, well, August is the primary, and I got to get through the primary before I can do anything. So my case would be, of the 4 Democrats running, my life experience in this state is more like the people of the state of Florida than anybody else running. I'm the only non-millionaire on the Democratic or the Republican side running for governor. And I don't believe you should have to be a millionaire in order to serve people. But that has to be evident in my ability to run, to compete, and to win. And if we win, or rather when we win, we will have the experience of not only having a governor who knows what it means to not only try to live and survive in this state, but also thrive in the state of Florida. I want to be not only the governor who can create the kind of public policy change that we need that will serve our communities and provide lift for everybody. I also want to be a physical example, a manifestation of the dreams of our foreparents, that anything is still possible, not just in the country, but very specifically in the state of Florida, where we seem to be such a conflicted state in many ways, but that is possible even here. And I believe by that example, imagine the number of kids that we get to inspire to do more, to work harder, to thrive in a more earnest way to achieve their dreams. And it needs to be something that people are tangible. They're going to know I was born in raised in Richmond Heights, right? To a mother who was a school bus driver and a daddy who was a construction worker. And had brothers who were felons. And siblings who didn't do it perfectly. And in my own life, haven't been a perfect person. But reflective of what it means to try to live and survive in this state. And moreover, try to thrive. That example is important.
Absolutely. Well, it has been my pleasure. I have one final question.
Yes.
It's not a question, it's a comment. My uncle, Mr. Kevin Taylor, is one of your constituents.
All right.
He actually lives in Tallahassee, and he is the one who brought you to my attention some years ago. He wanted me to give you a message, so I'm going to give you this message. He says you have his vote for governor, for sure. But he says more work needs to be done on the south side, I presume he means of Tallahassee, by code enforcement officers. Now maybe you know what that means. I don't live in Tallahassee. So
Yeah, so
no.
the south side obviously is one of the parts of our city that has been systemically neglected when it comes to economic development opportunity, infrastructure reinvestment, so on and so forth. And I assume he means by some of the code enforcement, it is some of the abandoned homes that have gone vacant that either need to be demolished or repurposed so that other folks can come in. And I don't disagree with that. In fact, I led the code enforcement abatement program. When I got elected, we had $20 million in fines that had accumulated in City Hall of properties that were neglected, that all they've been doing is collecting fines. And I got there largely because a constituent I visited with, before he was a constituent, when I was running, brought me in his house and showed me a roof that was nearly collapsing due to water damage. And I said, "Do you own your home?" He says, "No, my landlord owns it, but he won't do anything about it." And he says he doesn't charge me enough rent for him to do something about it. He says, "If you get elected, I hope you can get on him. I hope you can do something about that." And we ended up putting in place the code enforcement loan and rebate program, where we cleared out those fines. We force landlords to pay attention to their tenants, to not take advantage of them. If you need more in rent, you got to say you need more in rent. But people should not be living in third world conditions, not in this community, not in this day and age, not in this country, and certainly not in this state. And so we got a lot of gains there. We're not perfect, but it's an issue I'm certainly attuned to. And I'll have to get his address to make sure if he's got some specific properties that we're able to send code enforcement there to continue the important work that they're already doing. By the way, when I first got elected, there were 4 code enforcement officers in the city. We're now north of 9.
Wow, excellent. Well, Andrew, I feel awkward calling you Andrew.
No, Andrew is real. I
But
love it.
Andrew, thank you so much. It has been my pleasure representing the South Florida Times newspaper here. Again, I'm Daphne Taylor, sitting and talking with the Honorable Andrew Gillum, who is perhaps going to become our very first African-American governor in this great state of Florida.
Well, with their help and prayers, we'll get there.
Thank you so much.
I
It's been a
appreciate
pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yes, yes.
Being with the South Florida Times, which is the largest African-American paper in South Florida, and the last presidential election, there was some feelings that some of the dollars promoting the election didn't come into the black community or support the black press or anything related. What's your feelings on that?
Well, first of all, I agree with that assessment. And by the way, it's not just in South Florida. We felt the same thing in North Florida. And I've heard the same issues throughout Central Florida. The African American vote is so often relied upon to deliver for Democrats without much by way of investment in those communities. A lot goes on television. A lot goes on network TV. But where the difference is made is on the doorsteps and in our communities through venues that our constituents, largely folks of color, go to for information, legitimate information. And so I know from my campaign, when we began spending dollars to communicate, our dollars are going to be on the ground, and it's going to be in those communities and amongst outlets that have legitimacy and relevance for the voters that we're trying to recruit into this process. I will not be the Democratic nominee for governor if we don't get a strong African American vote. There's no doubt about it. So I'm very clear about where I have to go, where we have to communicate, where we have to advertise in order to put my agenda, my face, my background into in front of the voters that we need in order to win.
Can I be the first one on the list?
Absolutely. We're well aware of you. Don't play me. We know we're well aware of you. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you all very
Thank you so much. Let me let you
Absolutely.
go
Really
on.
appreciate
Good
it.
to see